All right, welcome into episode 62 of Happy Medium. I think this is the third straight interview I've done, so this is probably a record for me. But glad to be back on this beautiful Friday morning, almost afternoon. It's going to be about 60 degrees or so today. So beautiful, unseasonably warm, late February weather. So I decided to do a pod. Why not? But I'm back. Thank you all for coming back on, listening or watching, however you prefer. I always appreciate it, and I can introduce my next guest for you guys. So, from WGN Channel 9 here in Chicago, sports anchor and reporter Kaitlin Sharkey. Kaitlin, thank you so much for being able to come on. I
Thank
appreciate
you, Sam. Yeah, thank you, Sam. I'm excited to be part of the show. Thanks for having me on.
it. Yeah, of course. I know I just I was just kind of talking with you about it. I had Josh Friedman on in late October. So you're not the first Channel 9 sports member that I've had on here, but definitely always excited to talk with new people, if it's anchor, reporter, athlete, whomever. So always excited. So we can get started. So the first question that I like to kind of start off everyone with that I have on is kind of an icebreaker, kind of depending on how much you want to get into it. But what would you say your first interest into sports was in general?
I think for me, it started at a super young age, and it's kind of interesting that my interests in TV and sports kind of started at the same time. Not necessarily doing sports on TV, but the two separate interests. So I used to love watching the morning news with my mom before school. And then I played a bunch of sports when I was a kid. So, I mean, from T-ball up to late high school, I played, volleyball, basketball, ran track. I didn't play in college, but I would still play for fun in rec leagues and things like that. So I've always had an interest in sports since very, very little. I think my mom put me out on a soccer field in kindergarten, and I decided quickly that soccer will never be my sport. Your girl does not like to run at all. So I quickly pivoted to basketball and volleyball and things like that. So a very young age, and then when I figured out as I got a little bit older, like, wait, I play sports, I like sports, and then I can talk about them for a living. I was pretty hooked at a young age.
So kind of off that when you mentioned, you could or when you figured out that you could talk about sports. So what made you kind of first want to get into the whole like sports media world for you?
I think it started when, like I said, I knew going into high school that I wanted to do like television in some type of degree, but I thought it would be like news related. So my first news internship in college was strictly in news. And I was like, I don't like this. I don't like this one bit. I would always try to go back in the sports office and see what those guys were doing, like what they had on their day. And I'm like, their day is way better than the news reporter's day. Like they're going to a high school football practice, they're going to a Bucks practice, like all of these things when I was growing up and going to college in Milwaukee. So I was like, wait, I want to do sports news, and then I want to do sports broadcasting. So then my next internship was in sports, and from that moment on, I was hooked. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. And then 13 years later, here I am.
Uh, I know you were just kind of touching on your time in college. I saw you went to the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee.
Hmm.
I didn't go there, but that was actually funny enough. That was one of the schools that I was considering to going to, but didn't end up going there, unfortunately. But anyway, back to you. How was your time there in college, and then how did your time in general in college kind of help you prepare for the world outside of school?
I think for me, I loved going to UWM. I thought it was a great school. I knew, on the big scale of you think of journalism schools, UWM was not on there. And I was well aware of that. Financially, it just worked better for me. I was like, oh, do I go to Marquette? Do I go to this place? Do I go to this place? It worked out for me. And I have to say, if you take advantage of every opportunity, and I felt like I truly did because my mind was made up on what I wanted to do, and it was a matter of how am I going to make this happen. So I feel like UWM was great. I loved my college experience, my internships at local TV stations in Milwaukee. And Milwaukee's a great sports city. So for me, it was like the perfect combination. I got a lot of great experience. And then when I got my first job, it just happened to be in Wisconsin, in the Northwoods of Wausau, Wisconsin. So it was a great experience. And I always tell people, it's you want to go to those prestigious journalism schools, and they're great and they're amazing, but don't think that that's going to like catapult you. Sure, you may get different opportunities, but if that's not in your sights and if you can't pull that off, don't be afraid to go to a different university and then follow your own track, and you'll get the same opportunities.
Right? So I know you were just kind of touching on your first roles outside of college. So how was that, or those like initial experiences, not just covering sports, but covering sports in like smaller markets, that maybe not a lot of people like know much about.
At first it was very overwhelming, I have to say, because you are your department. So I mean, you're coming out of school and you're shooting your own stuff, you're editing your own stuff, you're producing your own sportscast. They're running out to set to then anchor the sportscast that you just produced, shot, and edited. And you're just kind of trying to find your bearings. You're learning how to be an interviewer. You're learning how to put packages together and cover things, and it's so much at once, but I think it's the best, like baptism by fire. Like, it's the best way to learn. I spent a year and a half in my first TV market, making, not a lot of money, but like the value in what I did and how much I learned. And I was lucky enough to cover an NFL team right out of school. So I would drive 90 minutes from Wausau to Green Bay and cover the Packers. So like, I'm 22 years old, holding my camera and, inside the Packers locker room and covering playoff runs and things like that. So it was a tremendous experience, but super overwhelming at first. I remember a lot of phone calls with my mom, like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I got to figure out something else. But you forge through, and this career, I always tell everybody, is purely driven on passion and love for it, because otherwise you're just not hanging in if you don't love what you do.
So I know you were just kind of touching on like how like important that like those initial experiences were for you. So like what things were you able to get out of your like first roles or like second roles or whatever to kind of like help propel you forward like as you went to new spots?
I would say, I mean, you're learning the skill set first and foremost, right? Of how to shoot, how to edit, how to write, how to do everything to make you kind of this versatile reporter, anchor, whatever. But I also think at the same time, your exposure, you become more comfortable on camera. You look back at clips of me when I was starting out, and you could tell I'm just starting out, not just by my appearance, but because of how now I'm just so much more comfortable in front of camera. So I think it's, you're learning your skill set, you're getting that, you're becoming more comfortable on camera, and it's also the people you meet. So like all of my jobs, when I was leaving Wausau to then get hired by Green Bay, and then when I got hired by Milwaukee, coming from Green Bay, it was all because other bosses and other news directors and other stations would see me work. So I always tell people, like, it's so great. You can be a great shooter, editor, you can be great on camera. How you carry yourself when you're at practices, games, around your colleagues, around your competitors, that speaks volumes. Because I remember my was soon to become my next boss in Green Bay called me and was like, "Hey, we have a job opening. I see you work super hard. Like, would you like to come here?" And that's literally how I went to a different station in a bigger market. So I think it's much about how you carry yourself, your professionalism, and your network can start immediately. So like, don't think that you're not, I'm not in a big market. How do I keep growing? How do I keep advancing? It's all about your network of people that you meet. And that begins with how you are to other people, how hard you work. Because the skill set and all of that's going to come naturally, right? Because you're doing it every single day. But that network can really it carved my path all the way basically to Chicago.
So so kind of, off that, I know you were just talking about how like, like people were like noticing your work and like and the good stuff that you were able to do when you first started out. So like, how did that like like how did that make you feel that, like people were like noticing your work and had a high like opinion of
I
you?
think for me it was motivating. It was a reminder to keep going because yeah, I mean, to my friends that I went to college and high school with, they looked at like she's living the dream. She's covering Aaron Rodgers and the Packers are good and she's a Wisconsin kid, so she grew up covering, she's covering the Brewers, the Bucks, the Badgers, all these things. But for me, they didn't see the behind the scenes of like how much work I was really doing and how stressful at times it can be, and how, when you're young, even now, your mistakes, like if you make a mistake and you work a job that no one's like doesn't really see, like my mistakes were on TV. So like if I had a bad show or I shot something funny or I edited something funny, there was just a little bit more pressure to me. So when you heard people tell you like, wow, you're really good at what you do, or I like how hard you work, it was very motivating to me. So if anything, it pushed me to be better and then to focus even more on my craft, because if there's anything I've learned in 13 years in this business is you can't take your foot off the gas. Like it's constantly changing. There's something else that you can be doing differently and better, and all of those things. So much like sports and much like being a professional athlete, you're a competitor in your field. And I think to me it was like encouraging and motivating to keep going.
So I know kind of you moved from your job in Milwaukee, I believe,
Hmm.
to Fox 32 here in the city. So how was it for you, not just leaving, that job specifically to come to Chicago, but leaving, the state in which you're from to come to a much bigger market?
It was tough, and it didn't help that I started in April of 2020, so the world was shut down and I didn't get to go into the station to do shows for over a year. So I was set up in my little studio apartment doing broadcasts for this big job that I finally got in Chicago. So it was a rough couple of years, but I also think to me, I was equally as nervous about like learning all new teams and learning the history of teams and like the culture of Chicago sports. Like obviously being on the Wisconsin side of things, I know that side of the rivalry in many of these teams, and but so I knew like obviously what the Bears history had been a little bit, but not like you do when you cover it every single day. So there was a bit of like I had to dive right in. I had to learn, and I'm still learning. Like I had to learn so much about every single team here in Chicago and get a pulse on the fan base, because I think that's what makes you a great sports reporter here in this city is understanding the fan base, understanding, and that's listening, that's talking to people, that's talking to other media members. It's like kind of picking the brains of people like, "Oh, okay, now it makes sense why they don't like this person or this history, or or why they're so frustrated or why they're so excited about a quarterback, is because they haven't had it." So it's like understanding that has been the most important part for me, making the adjustment and changing jobs and changing cities.
So kind of off that, I think when I talked to Josh, I think I asked him this because I wanted to get his perspective. So I want to get your perspective too. Obviously, having started in smaller markets like you had just talked about, and then being in a big market like Chicago right now, like what are some similarities or not between, covering sports in smaller markets versus you know, the third largest market?
I think it's the sheer amount of media members. So I think because at the core, the job's the same, right? Like when I go to a football practice or I'm covering a football game, you cover the game, you go into the locker room, you listen to press conferences, you do the interviews, you put it all together. Like all of that stuff is the same, right? And then, depending on wins and losses and how the team is, that part's different. But when you come to a market like Chicago, I remember just walking in, I'm like, all of us cover this team every single day. Like, how many of us are? I was at the NFL Combine this past week, and I don't even now. I'm just immersed in it, so I don't really realize it. But the Chicago Bears beat is just massive. Like, there's so many of us, and we're in this room, and we're waiting for Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson to come in. And I'm like, God, there's so many of us. And then you look at other markets and other teams, and you're like, there's no one there. And I think that's how the biggest difference for me, from small market to big market is sheer number of media members, and how, it's you're just your exposure goes a lot further. Milwaukee. the unique thing about Wisconsin is like the whole state covers the Packers. So like all the small markets still cover the team. So there's a good amount of people there. And then, they were good, so you get a lot of national media there, but that was the first thing I learned here. I'm like, man, there's a ton of us covering the Chicago Bears every single day, and it's still growing.
So, so kind of like between your time at Fox and then Channel 9 as well, would like how has your time in Chicago been for you? Like we talked about, considering that you are from Wisconsin, covered, all the Wisconsin teams for like smaller stations and affiliates than the stations here in Chicago, like has it been like as expected for you? Like were you expecting kind of that like initial like shockwave treatment per se to of like how big this market is for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it took years. I think I just finished my sixth Bears season. Now, the first two were just like in my brain, I can't even remember them because they were COVID. And I was literally sitting in an empty Soldier Field with this laptop, like interviewing players in a Zoom room. It was just the bizarrest time, right? So, 6 years in now, I think the hardest thing about being in a big market like Chicago is just establishing yourself and getting credibility and getting, your name out there. Like for a while, people are like, I would tweet something about the Bears and they'd be like, who the heck is Kaitlin Sharkey and how does she know the practice report? Like, where does she even come from? So now it's like, and and when you come to a larger market too, my role has changed. So I'm much more of a host, is just as much as I am a reporter. So I host GN Sports with Jared and Josh, and so you do a bunch of different roles, and you go on radio, and you do podcasts, and your role kind of gets bigger, and that's how I feel like you can get your name out there more because it's not just going to happen. In Wisconsin, it was a bit of a like I was from there, my family and friends could watch me. I'd be on TV and like you were there, you were established. Like you worked at one of the four big stations and everyone knew who you were. Here, you come here and you're like, luckily at being at Fox and at WGN, it had a lot of exposure for me, especially covering the Bears. Um, but it takes some time. I'm like 6 years in and I'm still like, no one knows who I am. Like I'm convinced like you just have that mindset. And I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just like that's how I motivate myself to be like, I belong here. I know what I'm talking about. I've built a rapport with these teams, athletes, but also within the city. And I hope the fan bases of these respective teams appreciate that like I'm just trying to be the connecting dot to them and their favorite teams.
So, between your two like Chicago roles at Fox and then at Channel 9, is there or has there been like a difference at all for you in between the two roles, or would you say that they're like pretty similar?
I think they're fairly similar. I think the biggest difference for me going to WGN was we do a 30-minute sports show 7 nights a week, and that's a huge undertaking, but I think it's great because we're the only sports team in the market to have it. And it's like a late night sports center. It's a great show. It's fun. But there's a lot of work that's involved for our producers and for us. And to put the product together every single night. So I think that was the biggest adjustment for me is WGN has news on all day long. So you're just constantly like turning out content, which is great. But at my time at Fox too was a great opportunity because they were the Bears TV partner, or they are the Bears TV partner. So I was hosting Bears Unleashed. I was hosting Bears, shows, and I was on the road and doing pregame and postgame. So that was equally a really cool opportunity. I think, when you're changing stations and you're changing even jobs or whatever, like finding what's unique about that place and kind of leaning into it has been like my favorite part. Like I love GN Sports. It's not always great getting it done at 11 o'clock at night, but we love the show and it's special to us for sure.
So, kind of on that, like kind of talking about like what you enjoy and stuff like that. Like so when it comes to being, an anchor and a reporter for your current role, what do you like enjoy most about it?
Hmm. And I get this question a lot, and it honestly, it's like you catch me on whatever week, I might have a different answer. Because when I'm in the studio, like repeatedly, and I love hosting GN Sports, I think traditional anchoring, I think we're going to see a change in it in local TV. We're seeing a lot of change in local TV as it is. But I think hosting, I do love it. I enjoy it. It's fun to quarterback a show. It's fun to have cool conversation, like you'd have at a sports bar watching a game. Like to put that on TV and to share all of the work that I put in as a reporter throughout the week. So like if I go to Bears practices every single day and then I come in the studio on a Monday with Jarrett, I can, I have a unique perspective because I was there all week. I know, I know exactly what I heard, what people were talking about, how the players feel, the pulse of the team, like being able to do both, because a lot of times these jobs don't afford you both. You're either one or you're the other. I'm lucky enough to have a hybrid role where I get to spend the week covering the team and then I go in the studio and I can sit down and talk about what I've heard, how I feel, like you're in it, you're ingrained in it. So I think my favorite part, honestly, has been the ability to do both, because I think sometimes as an anchor, it's hard. You're separated, right? You're in the studio. You're not with the coaches. You're not with the team. Yeah, you're reading, you're listening, you're doing all those things. It's very different than when you're like boots on the ground every single day with a team, building relationships, learning players outside of football. So, um, doing both of it has been my favorite part for sure.
So, like kind of between like all of your different experiences, whether it's in Wisconsin or in Chicago as well, how would you say that your different industry experiences and roles have shaped you and also helped you grow as well?
I think this career, it prepares you to be ready for anything. And I think most recently, it's been a matter of understanding the broadcasting landscape as it is, how it's shifted so much to digital and social media, and where it's like the TV becomes sometimes the back burner project. And you're like, it's like, did you post this? Did you get this? Did you get the clicks? Did you get the video up? We have a digital show. And you're like, wait a minute, like I thought this was all about TV, and it is, but it's being versatile. And if there's anything I can say about this career is like every day is different, and that's why I love it, and that's why I've been in it for so long. But learning how to do as many different things as possible. Like there's even times now where I'm like, if I have to sit down and edit something, I can. And it's like if I wouldn't have learned how to do that, I'm like, I'm not learning how to edit now. Like just gathering as much of a skill set as you can, because you just don't know when you're going to need it. And I've interviewed at this point every kind of athlete, from a 5-year-old golfer, that's like killing it at 5 years old, to some of Hall of Fame athletes on the second half of their career. So it's like you just all the experiences prepare you. And I don't think you realize it in real time. So it's immersing yourself in it, trying to do as much as possible, and then collecting all those skills, because you'll look back and be like, okay. Like I remember the first time you interview someone after a devastating loss, you're like, oh God, I can't do this. This is awkward. It's scary. Especially when you're young, starting out. I don't want to ask the wrong question, blah, blah, blah. And then, you fast forward and you're like, well, I've been covering a team that's lost 10 straight games. Like I know how to do this. Like I know how to approach it. I know how to like, there's certain elements of like you've seen it, your brain recognizes it, and then you just have to be confident that you know what you're doing and you're prepared. And that's, I think, what makes the best people broadcasters in this business.
So when it comes to skills, like I know you were just kind of touching on, were there skills for you that maybe like were like more beneficial to kind of like pick up on as you advance, maybe like compared to other skills that you have?
Now, like if I think like recently within the last couple of years, like I think Gen Z has a better, like the skills I'm trying to pick up now, Gen Z has been doing for a while. And that's your phone as your camera, like being comfortable to talk to it, like being, just the way that they shoot and edit and everything on their phone. I'm like, man, like I'm learning backwards. I'm like, I can edit you a sportscast. And then I'm sitting here, I'm like, I can't edit you a TikTok. Like it's not going to be fancy. It's not going to be. So it's kind of funny how those are the skill sets now that you need moving forward because they eat that stuff up. Like even our social team, our web teams will be like, I need a video talking about this, this, and this. And I can luckily hand it off and someone can put it together really nicely for me. But those are skills I'm trying to work on now. Um, and then because like editing, shooting, you can learn that. Like you can learn that. I think the digital platforms you should learn, and then also it sounds crazy, but like people skills. Because if you can't get someone to be comfortable in an interview, you're just not going to be where you want to be in this industry. And so it's like being confident, being prepared, and but being, reading the person you're interviewing, kind of meeting them where they're at. And I think that's just all people skills to me. So first and foremost, like that's what you have to learn, how to be comfortable around complete strangers and their good moments and their bad moments. Um, and then right now, I'm deep in trying to learn how to be a social media influencer.
And I only use like Instagram and like X pretty much. So
Yeah, yeah. I'm like slowly dipping into the TikToks. I'm like, I can't. It's so hard. And I watch in like in awe of what people can do on them for real.
I do not have TikTok on my phone. I've never cared to use it. I have
Yeah.
why I don't use TikTok. I just don't really care for it right now.
Yeah, that's how I'm like I love my Instagram and I love Twitter more than I loved X, but for sports I think those, X especially, like, I love those days where we would watch sporting events, and we still do a little bit, but it doesn't have that same like where we'd all be watching the same game and tweeting out our thoughts in the moment. That was like one of my favorite things about connecting with people on Twitter.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So from like any stop or like job that you've had in your career, whether it's in Wisconsin or in Chicago, has there been like a favorite piece or a favorite story that you've done and why?
Oh man. I think there's been so many, and I've interviewed the former commissioner of baseball, Bud Selig, in his office in Milwaukee. And, you get those big interviews and it's just the two of you. And, I've covered players going into Canton, NFL Hall of Fame. Like, there's just moments where you're like, wow, this is really special. I don't have like specifics, but like there's like flashes in my brain where I'm like, that was a fun run. When the Brewers made the NLCS against the Dodgers, like I just remember being like, this is the best time of my life. The Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals. And most recently, I have to say, this past football season was probably the most fun I've had in a long time. Like I've covered winning, I've covered Green Bay going almost all the way a number of times, but this one here in Chicago was just, I think it'll be one I'll remember for a very long time because it just the way the games unfolded half the time, and to see the city of Chicago be come alive and have that love for the Bears, and then see the success rewarding them for their passion and love as a fan base was super special to me. So this football season is going in the books for sure for me.
For those infamous Bears Packers games this past year, was your phone going pretty crazy?
Oh, it was in the first half. And then, the Bears would do what they do. And then I swear I didn't talk to my family or friends in Wisconsin. Like, no, I didn't hear from anyone. I was like, oh, okay, no one wants to talk now. And then they'd circle back and be like, I can't believe they won. But funny enough, which is crazy, like people I grew up with, and part of it is because I covered the team, but they'd be like, we're rooting for the Bears, I guess, because they beat us and you're there and we want you to cover a Super Bowl. So I was like, wow, the world was frozen over if Packer fans are like, we want to see the Bears in the Super Bowl. But who knows, maybe next year.
Yeah, maybe. And they got pretty close to the
Yeah.
round and one interception away, you could say, from going to the NFC championship. But hopefully next year. I don't know.
Yeah. Should be a fun one. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure. Kaitlin, thank you so much for being able to come on. This has been really, really fun, really enjoyable. I always enjoy getting to talk with new people on here, if it's anchors, reporters, athletes, whomever. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course.